Marcus Weller had barely taken his seat when the insult landed like a hammer wrapped in academic smugness. And, of course, Professor Zalbrun said, pacing before the holo display, we mustn't forget Earth's contribution to the nutritional database, leafy greens, root tubers, and an almost comical dependence on starches. The so-called omnivores, though in practice, plant eaters with delusions of predation. The room erupted in layered laughter. High-pitched keening from the Lithari, low thrumming from the four-lunged Drox. Even the translator implant seemed to smirk. Marcus stared ahead, jaw clenched. His tray protein bar, hydration tube, and the gray, flavorless slop the Academy called universal sustenance suddenly felt like betrayal. He hadn't spoken up. Not when they laughed at human gravity tolerance, not when they called Earth's immune system overdramatic. But this was personal. Zalbrun turned, spindly arms folded behind his back. One wonders how a species that consumes leaves and roots survived its own evolutionary bottlenecks. But perhaps that's a question for another day. No one noticed Marcus reach for his datapad. No one heard the quiet tapping as he began listing ingredients. Meatballs, bacon, brisket. He didn't look up when class ended. Didn't join the migration of tentacles and scales and gliding bioforms. He just sat there, staring at his screen, and thought, let's see how you handle real food. The Zinthari Science Academy, buried deep in the cliffs of Marex 4, prided itself on being the most diverse center of xenobiological learning in the galactic sector. Species from 27 planets studied there, some requiring personal climate domes or hypersalinated atmospheres just to survive the coursework. Marcus had known this when he applied. Known he'd be the only human. Knew he'd be watched. What he hadn't known, what Earth's prep team never mentioned, was how dismissive the others would be. It wasn't open hostility. Not exactly, but it was there in every sideways comment, every sideways glance. The Drox students who coughed theatrically whenever he unwrapped an Earth protein bar. The Valarians who scooted their osmopods 3 feet away every time he entered the dining cluster. The small, sharp-limbed Jick who'd asked, wide-eyed, do you really have bone marrow inside you? And now, this. Plant eaters with delusions of predation. Marcus left the lecture hall with his eyes locked straight ahead, ignoring the overlapping alien chatter and the occasional glance thrown his way. Zalbrun's comment kept echoing through his head. He could have challenged it, could have pointed to Earth's documented omnivory, the billions who still consumed animal protein in all its forms. But he hadn't. Not because he was afraid, though, being expelled from the Academy would have repercussions, but because he knew how little words would matter here. These were scientists. Show me the data. That's what they respected. So he'd show them something better. Back in his dorm, Marcus opened the climate seal on his travel chest. It hissed softly, revealing the small cooler at the bottom. He'd been saving it technically against dorm policy for a special occasion. This felt close enough. Inside, nestled in vacuum-sealed pouches and cryo-wraps, were the treasures from home. Hickory-cured bacon, venison meatballs, flash-frozen after a hunt with his uncle last fall, and half a slab of smoked brisket from a Kansas barbecue joint that had been operating since before Earth had its first orbital shuttle. He set them out carefully, running through the Academy's local air quality regulations. He wasn't about to violate safety protocols, but he knew the scent would be strong. He'd cook just enough. Enough to make a point. The dorm's micro-kitchen wouldn't do. Not enough ventilation, and it would alert the fire suppression system. He needed something isolated. So, he hacked together a portable containment cooker from his engineering kit, an old thermal panel, and a salvaged fume hood. The result was ugly, but efficient. At 0320 Standard Time, Marcus tested a strip of bacon. The smell curled through the air like smoke from a forgotten forest fire. He immediately shut the lid. Perfect. The next morning, Marcus skipped breakfast. He didn't eat. Not because he was nervous, though. Deep down, he was, but because he wanted his senses sharp. His muscles twitched with the memory of hunt camps, of early winter mornings when food meant warmth and focus and not just sustenance. He checked the container one last time. Still warm, still sealed. He waited until the lecture started. 15 minutes in, he opened the door. The room hushed at his entrance. He was rarely late. Zalbrin paused mid-sentence, his segmented arms folding tighter behind him. His gaze tracked Marcus as he walked deliberately down the center aisle and into his usual seat, third row from the back. He didn't speak, didn't look up. He just opened his pack. The seal broke with a faint hiss, and the smell rolled out. It hit like a low-pressure wave, thick, savory, smoky. The bacon's salt and fat cut through the recycled air. The meatballs added depth, spice, an almost syrupy undertone. And the brisket? That was the kicker. A dark, peppery richness that wrapped around everything else, bold and unapologetic. The room reacted instantly. A Lethari shrieked and leapt over 2 seats, chittering as it flung itself through the door. A Valerian's gill membranes clamped shut as it retched fluid into a side basin. The gelatinous Nork from Quadrant 6 gave a wet shudder and collapsed into unconscious translucency, its emergency alert beacon flashing amber. Even the Drox twins, notorious for their stench-resistant respiratory webs, stumbled to the far wall, gasping. Professor Zalbrin staggered back, one of his secondary arms clutching at his neck sack. His second lung spasmed audibly. Marcus had read about the species' lipid hypersensitivity, and a student from the back initiated emergency detox protocols. Klaxons rang, ventilation hoods deployed. The ceiling shifted open to dump neutralizing foam, though the smell clung stubbornly to every surface. Marcus sat, silent, his lunch untouched. And the meat kept sizzling in the thermal container, mocking them all. 2 hours later, after he'd been decontaminated, scanned, and lectured by a squadron of multi-species biohazard officials, Marcus found himself in a sterile interrogation room. Professor Zalbrin stood at the other side of the table, flanked by 2 xenocultural liaisons and a Zinthari ethics officer. His skin had taken on a pale orange hue shock, Marcus assumed, or rage, maybe both. "You brought meat into a mixed-species facility," Zalbrin hissed, "uncooked, unfiltered, and by the scent, signature organic." "It was cooked," Marcus replied calmly. "And fatty." "Correct." "Do you understand what you've done?" the ethics officer asked. 3 students required respiratory neutralization. 1 suffered lipid shock. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at each of them in turn. Then, quietly, deliberately, he said, "You mocked my biology. You called us plant eaters with delusions of predation. I responded with evidence." Zalbrin's mouth twitched. "You call that evidence?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You wanted to know how we survived our evolutionary bottlenecks? Simple. We hunted. We tracked prey across days, sometimes weeks. We raised animals for generations. Killed them ourselves. Skinned, cleaned, smoked, cured. Every village on Earth has recipes older than your star maps. My grandfather could gut a buck faster than I could tie a shoe. And yes, we still do it, because it's part of who we are, because it worked." A long pause filled the room. The ethics officer said, "You still haven't explained why you thought it appropriate to bring it here." Marcus met her gaze. "Because words weren't working, and because you've never smelled real food before." Another silence. And then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small, sealed tin on the table. "Beef jerky," he said softly. "If you want to test it." None of them moved. No one touched the tin. The ethics officer scanned it silently, her left ocular node glowing faint green. Carbon-based protein matrix. Organic, dried, high sodium, mammalian origin, confirmed, Earth-cervid species. Zalbrin stiffened. "You brought more?" Marcus didn't answer. He simply folded his hands and waited. They dismissed him 20 minutes later, saying the council would deliberate. He was not permitted back into shared lecture halls until further notice. His coursework would be reviewed for cultural alignment. A report would be submitted to the Earth Exchange Program. A medical screening team was ordered to conduct risk assessments on his dorm equipment. As he left the room, one of the xenocultural liaisons, a squat Tarkan with glossy cranial fins, paused and muttered, "Smelled kinda good." Marcus didn't look back. By mid-cycle, the story had spread. The meat incident became the #1 trending topic on the internal academy stream. The footage was grainy, likely leaked from a student's personal implant, but it didn't matter. The audio was crystal clear. The sizzle of bacon, the gasp from a Drox, the sound of someone retching in the back, a snippet of Marcus's calm voice over the chaos. We still do it, because it worked. Comments exploded. Primitive savagery. Impressive lung capacity, honestly. Can someone explain what jerky is? Do humans really eat animals they know? This explains their eyes. Predatory fixation. Horrifying. Is there a recipe link? That last one got flagged. Twice. A few students tried to joke about it, memes of Marcus with laser eyes riding a cow, wielding slabs of bacon like battle axes, but the tone had shifted. The laughter was nervous now. Defensive? Several species had long forgotten their own carnivorous histories, bred out by biotech diets and nutrient fogs. To them, hunting was something that happened in simulations, or ancient legends. This was too close, too real. Professor Zalbrin, meanwhile, was very publicly not commenting. The Academy's press division issued a dry statement emphasizing interspecies respect and pending inquiry results. Behind the scenes, though, he was gathering support from the Ethics Council, calling Marcus's demonstration an act of cultural violence and biological terrorism. Marcus spent the next 2 days confined to his dorm, mostly in silence. On the third morning, he was summoned again. This time, it wasn't a hearing. It was a panel. 4 xenodietitians, 2 psychologists, a bioethics adjudicator, 1 translator, and Professor Zalbrin. The adjudicator, a crystalline being known as Turl, began without preamble. Your species consumes animals as a normal practice? Yes, Marcus said. Not just in the past? No. Zalbrin cut in, voice sharp. Clarify the methods. Marcus turned toward him, eyes steady. Hunting, trapping, fishing, domestication, slaughter, butchering, grilling, roasting, smoking, frying. Some places ferment. Others cure. We've spent centuries developing techniques to make each part edible, even the difficult ones. A psychologist, silver-skinned, with a split vertical mouth, leaned forward. Why? Nutrition, Marcus said. Taste, culture, survival, all of it. She blinked. You enjoy it? Yes. There was a long silence. One of the xenodietitians tapped into her display. Your digestive tract is complex, acidic enough to dissolve muscle. Enzymes specialized for both starch and fat breakdown. Gut flora, surprisingly robust. No wonder your nutrient processing is so adaptable. The second dietitian, a floating sphere with internal pulsing lights, asked, How did your ancestors balance the risk? Hunting is resource-intensive, dangerous. We evolved for it, Marcus said. Persistence hunting. We sweat instead of panting. Our eyes face forward. We lost fur so we could run long distances without overheating. There are tribes that still do it. On foot, in the desert. Run prey down? The translator asked, sounding almost disturbed. Until it drops, Marcus replied. Tyrrell hummed, the crystalline plates along its torso flickering faint blue. And the meat you brought? It was from these hunts? The meatballs were venison from a white-tailed deer I shot last fall. The bacon was cured pork, farm-raised. The brisket was beef smoked for 12 hours. Traditional method. Professor Zalbrin let out a derisive snort. Barbarism, preserving nerve tissue in salt and fire. Laughable. Marcus didn't rise to it. Instead, he looked at Tyrrell. You want to understand why we do it? Study the full record. I gave permission to pull my Earth Health file. It includes metabolic logs, hunt certifications, nutritional panels. My planet has dozens of cultural diets built around meat, some based on necessity, some tradition, some spiritual. And they all worked. Tyrrell gestured toward the display. We've begun analysis. Early findings indicate remarkable adaptability. A single human body can process Arctic sea mammal blubber, high-altitude grain, and jungle protein sources with minimal transition time. Correct. The sphere chimed again. There's also historical record of early domestication. You raised animals before you developed written language. We needed them to survive. Why not stop, once your technology advanced? Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, because it wasn't just survival anymore. It became identity, community, celebration. You can replicate nutrients in a lab, but you can't replicate what it means to roast a kill with your family on the solstice or smoke a cut over a fire passed down 3 generations. The psychologist murmured, and none of this is seen as ethically questionable? Oh, it's questioned, Marcus said. We argue about it constantly. Farming standards, animal rights, environmental cost. Some people go full vegetarian. Others eat only what they hunt themselves. It's a huge part of our global conversation. But pretending it doesn't exist, that's not who we are. The panel remained silent. Finally, Professor Zalbrin stood. I warned the council that integrating humans would introduce complications. Here is the result: instability, trauma. 3 students still recovering from exposure to lipids. 1 in therapy. This is not an ecosystem where carnivory is acceptable. Marcus stood as well. His voice remained even. Then you shouldn't have invited omnivores. They released him with restrictions. He was not to bring any additional meat products to shared spaces. He was to submit his food intake to the nutritional committee. His classes were to remain virtual until the inquiry was complete. But the data kept spreading. More students began reading earth hunting logs, viewing clips of traditional butchering. One group of droks attempted to simulate human digestion in a lab-grown stomach. The results apparently were unexpectedly flavorful. A minor diplomatic incident flared when a Valerian student requested samples of smoked salmon for cultural research. The Earth Exchange Office issued a soft statement supporting Marcus's dietary integrity. Quietly, they dispatched a diplomatic observer. Professor Zalbrin, cornered in a growing debate, found himself answering questions from colleagues, questions he didn't like. Is it true humans can process bone marrow? Why do they cook with char? Doesn't that increase carcinogens? They can metabolize organ meats? Zalbrin deflected, scowled, and finally requested a private meeting with Tyrell. He emerged from that meeting pale and silent. Marcus didn't leave his dorm much that week. He cooked once, alone, carefully sealing the vents. His body ached from the stress. His chest felt heavy. He hadn't slept well. He wasn't afraid exactly, but he was tired. Tired of defending something that had always been normal. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even a nutrition major. He just liked meatballs. On day 10, the council decision came through. Marcus was cleared of wrongdoing. No intent to harm. His action, while disruptive, was deemed a cultural counter-demonstration, a formally protected act under the Interspecies Educational Charter. Zalbrin was advised to issue a correctional statement. Marcus read the message 3 times, expression unreadable. Then he placed it gently on his desk. He didn't smile. The symposium was held under sterile white domes on the Academy's upper terrace, one of the few places with open sky, or at least the illusion of it. Thin artificial clouds drifted across the dome's projection field, while 16 species gathered at circular tables. Some wore environmental bubbles, others hovered, coiled, or anchored themselves in nutrient gel pods. Near the center, under the largest emitter array, stood a podium adapted for multi-limb and no-limb species alike. Marcus adjusted the collar of his borrowed exchange uniform. His original had been deemed culturally insensitive after the bacon incident. Apparently, the lingering particles had bonded with the fabric. This one didn't fit quite right, and it smelled faintly of citrus and ozone. He looked out over the room. No laughter this time, no whispers, just watching, waiting. The Planetary Nutrition Summit had fast-tracked itself after a flurry of cross-species academic requests. Apparently, Earth's nutritional history, long considered quaint, was now worthy of formal investigation. What began as a disciplinary review had snowballed into policy reform talks, dietary ethics debates, and multiple requests for Earth cultural food samples. Marcus had barely survived the last 2 weeks. He was still exhausted, still fielding messages, some curious, some combative. A Lethery sociologist wanted to document his culinary aggression vector. A fungal-based species called the egret sent an image of what they claimed was meat paste, asking, "Is this similar? Can we eat together now?" Even the council had been oddly polite. They hadn't apologized, but they had invited him to speak. That alone meant something. Marcus inhaled through his nose, held it, then stepped up to the podium. The translator node blinked green. He began, Earth humans are omnivores. That's not a slogan or a metaphor. It's the result of millions of years of adaptation. From gut flora to incisor structure, from vitamin B12 requirements to metabolic flexibility, we're wired to eat everything. He paused. Let the translator work. Our species has survived ice ages, droughts, migrations, wars, and mass extinctions. And we didn't do it with nutrient paste. We did it by eating what the environment gave us. Plants when available, meat when needed, often both. An insectoid delegate chirped in a soft sideband frequency. Translation flashed, And you enjoy it? Marcus nodded. We do. Not all of us. Some humans choose plant-only diets for ethical or environmental reasons. We respect that. But many still eat meat, with intent, with skill, with cultural meaning. Another translator ping. This time, a floating digestive sac from the Brel Coalition. But why consume what once lived? What had mind and muscle? Marcus met its unblinking gaze. Because we can't pretend we're separate from the cycle. On Earth, predators and prey are part of the same ecosystem. Death isn't comfortable. It isn't easy. But we honor it. We use every part. We farm ethically when we can, hunt responsibly, and we cook to connect. That word landed harder than he expected. Connect. Across the room, a few delegates murmured in their own species' tongues. A spectral being from the gas colonies floated closer to a scent barrier, observing him silently. Marcus continued, We didn't bring meat to offend. We brought it because it's part of who we are. Our strength isn't just in eating, it's in adapting. Your nutrient fogs and gel vats and print meals are impressive. So are our pit fires and slow roast traditions. There's room for both. A long silence followed. Then the Ygre representative raised a pseudopod. You say you cook, may we observe it? Marcus smiled just a flicker. Better. You can smell it. Clearance for a live demonstration took hours. The ethics committee argued, the medical board set up biofilters, and a Drox ambassador filed an official protest. It was overruled. The diplomatic observer from Earth sent a single-line approval. Proceed under Culinary Protocol 4D. Controlled exposure, no open flame. Marcus wheeled out his makeshift cooking unit under the dome's auxiliary airflow system. They'd given him space, a lot of it, just in case. This time, no bacon. He wasn't stupid. Instead, he'd chosen something milder, familiar, even meatballs, medium spiced, slow simmered in tomato reduction. The protein was earth turkey, lower in saturated fat, less aromatic. He'd packed them frozen in vacuum tins, then rehydrated them with his unit's steam pressure pod. As the heat built, the first wisps rose into the air. The aroma was subtle at first, rich, savory, not aggressive. A lethargy sniffed the air, tilted its triangular head, then whispered something to its neighbor. 10 minutes in, the Ygre undulated forward until its primary core mass hovered near the edge of the cooking field. 20 minutes. The translator pinged from somewhere near the back, requesting sample interface, hypothetical tasting. A silence fell again. Marcus glanced at the medical liaison. She nodded reluctantly and handed him a sterilized single-portion container. He plated one meatball, sealed it, and extended it via sanitized tray. The Ygre opened a small membrane. The entire room held its collective breath. There was no collapse, no shrieking, just a ripple across the Ygre's membrane as it absorbed the morsel. Then, saline balance high, textural complexity, unfamiliar, slight umami overload, no adverse reaction. Another beat. Interesting. The room relaxed, slightly. By end of session, 4 more species had requested scent samples, 2 simulated digestion chemically. 1, a Drox, no less hovered near Marcus as he cleaned up. What is in the red paste? Tomato, garlic, salt, earth spices, a little sugar. The Drox rumbled. It is not unpleasant. It was the closest thing to a compliment Marcus had heard all week. The following morning, the lecture hall was quiet when he entered. Not just less hostile quiet. He took his seat. Zalbrin was already at the front, adjusting his holo display. Without preamble, he began. In light of recent symposium findings, it has come to the attention of this academy that our interspecies nutritional models lack sufficient representation of biologically omnivorous species. This gap will be addressed in upcoming revisions. No one spoke. He glanced briefly in Marcus's direction. Furthermore, my previous characterization of Earth biology as nutritionally obsolete was imprecise. I will amend the lecture record. Marcus didn't nod, didn't react. He just took out his datapad and slowly, methodically, opened his lunchbox. This time, he'd packed mild, spiced turkey meatballs again, just warm enough to carry scent, not strong enough to cause evacuation. Steam wafted lazily upward. Half the class turned toward him, curious. One student, small, insectoid, wide black eyes, leaned over from the next row. "Is there a recipe?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "Sure," he said. "I'll send you the family version." The kitchen dome wasn't supposed to exist. Originally, it had been a botany annex, a humid, enclosed environment for cultivating rare mosses from Gentar 3. But the moss had overgrown the substrate walls, damaging the filtration system. Eventually, the research was moved, and the dome was decommissioned, abandoned mid-cycle. Then, the meatball incident happened. Now it had new signage: Intercultural Nutritional Research and Application Zone Experimental. Marcus just called it what everyone else did: the dome. It started small, a few curious students, a handful of faculty, one grilling unit, and a lot of hesitation. No open flames, no heavy fats, and strict environmental monitoring. But over the next 2 months, something strange happened. Aliens started cooking. Not just observing cooking. A Lithari student brought her species fermented root spirals and asked Marcus to teach her what caramelizing meant. A Drox culinary historian showed up with replicated muscle fibers from a long-extinct species native to his homeworld and asked Marcus how to sear it like in the video. The video, of course. The symposium footage had been sanitized and distributed across 3 research networks. Somewhere between the first cautious meatball and the final scent wave, it had triggered a food-focused renaissance in xenonutrition circles. Marcus found himself fielding interview requests, recipe translation projects, and even a contract offer from a biotech startup asking to digitally encode the emotional spectrum of roast meat. He declined, politely. But he kept showing up at the dome, every evening. Some nights were slow, just him, cooking in silence. Other nights, it was chaos. Multi-species chaos. One evening, a group of Brel spheroids tried to steam a blend of earth quinoa and Drox marrow paste. The experiment resulted in a bubbling foam that cracked a floor tile and caused an emergency evacuation. Another night, a group of students recreated a human grill party using temperature-regulated plasma fields. Marcus supervised, heart pounding, as he explained the difference between searing and incinerating. The most bizarre request came from a pair of Valerian twins who insisted on recreating the ritual of flavor sharing Marcus had mentioned offhand. "You mean potluck?" Marcus had asked. "Yes," they replied in unison. He'd helped them organize the first one. 16 species brought food. Only 5 could safely eat more than one other dish. Everyone left smiling if their species had facial musculature that allowed it. Professor Xalbrin never visited the dome. Not directly. But reports began filtering back through faculty channels. Nutrition students were signing up for elective seminars about Earth culinary anthropology. A second-year biochemistry major submitted a dissertation titled Heat, Fat, and the Psychology of Satiation in Primitive Bipeds. It was accepted with high honors. 3 different academic boards reached out to Marcus for guidance on implementing interspecies culinary labs. He gave them what he could. But he was careful. He didn't want Earth's cuisine to become a novelty, a trend to be consumed and discarded. He wasn't trying to prove humans were superior. He just wanted understanding, recognition that their way wasn't a mistake. So, when the Academy invited him to deliver a closing lecture at the end of the rotation, he said yes. With one condition. The lecture took place not in the usual hall, but in the dome. The cleaning teams had sterilized it, added extra airflow buffers, and warned Marcus again not to bring bacon. He didn't. Instead, he brought stew. Beef and barley, slow-cooked with garlic, onion, thyme, and just enough salt to warm the senses without overwhelming them. It was mild, thick, and ancient based on a recipe from his great-grandmother, who'd made it on the northern plains of Earth before his family had even owned a car. The room was packed. Faculty, students, observers from 3 sectors, even a few off-world dignitaries with sealed taste domes. No chairs, just open space, padded benches, and observation panels. Marcus stood behind a wide table, the stew steaming gently behind him. He took a breath and began. When I first came here, I felt like an alien, not because I was human, because I wasn't understood. He let that settle. I listened to lectures that dismissed Earth biology. I ate food that barely counted as food. I kept quiet while my culture was called obsolete. Some murmurs, but no interruptions. He continued. So I brought meat to class, not to offend, but to show what words couldn't: our history, our survival, our flavor. He gestured to the pot behind him. This is not a weapon. It's not political. It's just stew. It's what my family makes when someone's sick, or tired, or sad. It's how we say, "You belong here." He paused, then smiled, just a little. I've spent months answering questions about enzymes, about hunting, about ethics, and I'm happy to, but the truth is simpler than all of that. He stepped back and ladled stew into a small, sealed dish. This is how we explain ourselves. He handed it to the closest student, a nervous-looking jick who accepted it with trembling claws. They took a bite, paused, then emitted a clicking sound the translator registered as pleasant shock. Across the room, a Brel waved a feeding tendril. Next sample, please. Later that night, Marcus sat outside the dome, sipping water under the artificial stars. His feet ached, his back hurt, he smelled like garlic. He was happy. A soft voice spoke beside him. I misjudged your species. He turned. Professor Zalbrin stood there, arms behind his back, the lines around his ocular plates drawn. I reviewed the metabolic data, the ecological models, your historical records. The efficiency of early human protein adaptation is statistically remarkable. Marcus didn't say anything. Zalbrin hesitated. Your methods remain viscerally disturbing. Fair, Marcus said. But your argument held. Another silence. Then the professor bowed his head, a small, sharp movement. I will update the course material. Marcus raised an eyebrow. With meat? With accuracy. They stood there a moment longer. Then Zalbrin turned and left, his steps soft against the stone. Marcus watched him go, then leaned back and looked up at the dome's simulated night sky. By the next rotation, things had changed. The kitchen dome was officially sanctioned. A new elective opened: Culinary Anthropology and Adaptive Dietetics. Marcus was listed as a co-instructor. He still cooked twice a week, not for shock, not even for education, just because it brought people together. The ethics board revised its policies on biological provocation, adding clauses about context, intention, and cultural demonstration. A Valerian student submitted an Earth-style meatloaf to the Academy's gastronomy showcase. It won 3rd place. And Marcus? He kept bringing lunch to class. Not to prove anything, just to eat. One day, as he opened his tin lemon pepper chicken over rice, with a side of sautéed mushrooms, a familiar scent drifted over from the row behind him. He turned. The insectoid student from earlier was holding a container. Inside was something vaguely brown, slightly oily, and steaming.